The 70-200 is a legendary lens, draped in history, and Nikon have released a new one. This is their new 70-200mm f2.8 version 2, the second generation for the Nikon Z mount. It's smaller, lighter, has a new optical design, and it even focuses faster. So let's deep dive into this lens and find out why it's the best 70-200 f2.8 that Nikon have ever made. So what's new about this 70-200 f2.8 version 2? Well, firstly, on the outside, compared to the previous version, this lens is significantly lighter and also smaller. It's 362 grams lighter, and this also means that this is the lightest 70-200 f2.8 in its class, and it's 12 millimeters shorter than the previous version. When it comes to buttons on the lens, you have the same options when it comes to lens function 1 and 2, and these can be fully customized in your camera. But there's now an additional button that is part of lens function 1. In replacement of the screen that was on the previous 70-200, there's now a top placed button on this new version 2. And there's still 4 lens function 2 buttons towards the front of the lens. You still have access to autofocus and manual focus on the side of the lens, and also the ability to limit the range of focus on the side of the lens as well, now giving you the option to go from a full range of focus to then narrowing it down from being able to shoot from 5 meters all the way up to infinity. One of the biggest changes on the outside of this lens is how it deals with the foot. You'll notice that I'm holding the lens here without any foot or part of the color attached. With the old 70-200 2.8, you could remove the base plate, but you couldn't necessarily remove all of the color. So to be able to make the lens lighter, you now have a choice. You have options. You can either have this cover that will cover the color of the lens itself, allowing you to have the lens in its lightest form, or you can also attach a color and foot combination. These are all one single unit. You're not able to split them, but this can be then attached to the lens, giving you that control to have the foot on the bottom of the lens, allowing you to tripod mount it. And a really interesting part of this foot, and one thing that I'm really excited about, this is now Arca Swiss compatible. This is the first Nikon foot that's Arca Swiss compatible in the Z mount range, meaning you don't have to either buy a secondary foot or attach a plate to the base of this foot on the lens itself. This is something I'm really happy to see, and I'm really excited to see this in the future of Nikon lenses going forward. But this Arca Swiss mounting just means that you can easily attach it to Arca Swiss compatible heads when you're tripod mounting the lens or when you're attaching it to a gimbal. Just like the previous 70-200, you can also make use of teleconverters with this lens, meaning you can make use of the Z mount 1.4 times teleconverter and the 2 times teleconverter. There's also been a slight change to the lens hood of this 70-200 versus the previous version as well. So the 70-200 lens hood now has the option for an accessible window, allowing you to quickly change and adjust things like a polarizer or a variable ND if you're using it on the front of the lens whilst the lens hood is attached. When it comes to the filter thread at the front, this is a 77mm filter thread, just like the previous 70-200 2.8. The closest focusing distance of this 70-200 has also changed. At the wide end, you now have the ability to close focus at 38 centimeters, and at the long end, you have a close focusing distance of 80 centimeters. That's a fair bit closer than the previous model, which was 50 centimeters at the wide end, and then 1 meter at the long end. So how has Nikon been able to make this lens lighter? Well, firstly, there's a new optical design in this lens. It uses less elements in less groups, using 18 elements in 16 groups versus the previous lens using 21 elements in 18 groups. And it also means that there's less moving elements when you zoom the lens, making the balance of the lens nicer and easy to deal with, especially if it's being gimbaled or if you're using it handheld with a small body like a ZR or a Z6 III. Nikon have also been able to change their manufacturing techniques and implement thinner, lighter elements in this lens versus the previous lens, meaning that is also going to add to the overall weight reduction of this 70-200, making it as light as possible and making it much easier to carry, especially if you're out shooting in an environment like this for things like landscapes, sports, wildlife, and so on. Alongside the new optical design, there's also a new optical coating. This 70-200 f2.8 version 2 also now employs Nikon's meso coating that we have seen on previous lenses in the past. This coating really helps to reduce ghosting and flare. It means that this lens is going to perform better even when shooting directly into sunlight or shooting a subject that is backlit. When it comes to autofocus, this 70-200 is significantly faster at focusing than the previous lens, up to 3.5 times faster at focusing. And that's mainly because of the adoption of the new Silky Swift VCM motors that we saw in the 24-70 2.8 version 2 as well. Those motors have also been used in the 400 2.8 and the 600 f4. So these are really high-end, incredibly fast autofocusing motors. This 70-200 2.8 with those new focusing motors is 45% faster at its scan rate, meaning it's much faster at focusing from one subject to another. And it's also 40% faster whilst tracking a moving subject whilst zooming. Nikon's Silky Swift VCM motors rely on magnets to be able to move those autofocusing elements in the lens. And because there's less elements that are moving when the lens is focusing, that aids in being faster, but also quieter. This 70-200 is 50% quieter than the previous version thanks to those new motors and also having less elements to move whilst focusing. Just like the new 24-70 F2.8 version 2 makes use of an optical ABS encoder. This ABS encoder allows the lens to more accurately know exactly where its focusing elements are. In fact, it's 17.5 times more accurate than the previous lens, meaning that those focusing elements can move in exactly the direction that they need to move to make sure that your subject is in focus. This is in combination with a new control algorithm as to how the lens controls its focusing elements, meaning that the 70-200 is going to be significantly faster when dealing with faster autofocusing rates and also dealing with higher frame rates. The 70-200 also has built-in VR. This built-in VR will work in combination with the in-body stabilization of the camera that you're using. And if your camera is able to make use of synchro VR, then this lens will give you up to 6 stops of image stabilization using the optical VR in the lens and also the in-body stabilization in the camera. The number of aperture blades in this new lens have also been changed. In the previous lens you had 9, and in this new 70-200 there are now 11 aperture blades. This is just going to give you more control over your out of focusing areas, especially if you're shooting the lens stop down and making sure that those bokeh balls in the background are still nice and round. Like a lot of new lenses that have been released by Nikon, this new 70-200 is not only designed for stills, but also has video in mind. Not only does it have features on the outside like the ability to have a click or clickless dial, but you also have lots of changes on the inside. There's less moving weight when you're zooming the lens in and out. There's also been adaptations for focus breathing, and making the autofocusing motors 50% quieter are all things that are going to make this lens much easier to use for video and not just photography. I've been able to use this 70-200 f2.8 version 2 over the past couple of weeks in different environments and also mixed conditions as well. And the biggest takeaway for me is the weight. The weight difference from this lens versus the original Z-mount 70-200 is significant, and you do notice it when you're using this lens throughout the day. And when you can compare them side by side, you can feel that weight difference as well. The autofocus, the size, the weight and the tripod collar really add to the experience of using this lens. This is really the best 70-200 f2.8 that Nikon have ever made.